So in June of this year, I met someone who shaped the way that history will play itself. Someone who changed my perspective on the future of the internet and what blockchain technology can bring. One of the leaders in the space, and someone I think that is very relevant in today. And what he told me was something that made me join Binance, but also kind of go all in into the Web3 space. He said something that I think about really every day when I get ready for my job and what I want to do with our company. And what he told me was the difference between what Web 2 is and what Web 3 will bring to the history of humanity. So what Web 2 really is just data. That's all it really is at its essence. It's companies who have set up extremely high barriers to enter through monetizing data. We're talking about Google, Facebook, and the likes. But what Web 3 does, it brings the ownership back to the people and creates value on a blockchain. People have their own ownership now. We have our own value. You can create entire businesses on a blockchain. You can create entire ecosystems on a blockchain, and that is value in itself. The reality is the Philippine economy is struggling. There's a 14th-month low in FDI as of July this year. In August, we doubled it to $800 million. That's still 20% off what we were in 2021, which is significantly lower than target. But if you look at VC money going into the Web3 space, that doubled in H1 of 2022 to $23 billion. Now my question is, can we just receive 2% of VC money going into the Philippines alone? That would already be more than FDI going to the Philippines this year. Just 2% of VC money. And I think that's not only attainable, but conservative, considering how big, I've been listening to all the speakers, how big we think that the blockchain space can be in Asia, but specifically in the Philippines. Now, thank you to Philippine Blockchain Week for having me. Thank you to Martha. Thank you to Donald. This is a tremendous event. It's an opportunity for all of us to meet each other, to learn about each other's businesses, but also to understand the people behind the companies, behind the software, and why we sacrificed so much to get here. Now, our mission at Binance is freedom of money, but freedom is subjective. What does freedom actually mean, and how can it impact people? And I want to think about it in three different ways. So, number one, I want to talk about financial inclusion. Number two, I want to talk about remittances. And number three, about job creation. I think these are the three most impactful things when you think about freedom of money, but also how it's going to help the Philippines. Now, financial inclusion is important. It's something that most speakers have been talking about today, but I want to give you my perspective on it from Binance and how we can help. So, roughly 34 million people in the Philippines are still unbanked. About 97% of Filipinos know there's fintech technology that can help them, but there's still 34 million people that are unbanked. There's a gap. But if you look at digital asset adoption, about 11.4 million people have digital assets in the country. 11.4 million people are banked because of digital assets. And that is something I think is very interesting. And if you look at the growth of e-wallets in just the last 2 years, people are aware of digital money and are accepting it. And I think that is a transition into digital assets. Now, when we talk about an adoption case, I want to talk about the first use case in the Philippines of play-to-earn gaming. So, play-to-earn gaming really boomed about 2 years ago with the adoption of Axie Infinity, from 0 to about 3 million customers in 2 years, which is a huge, huge increase. But it was the first use case. Blockchain technology is much more than one use case. And I think that what this actually taught us was people were going to use cryptocurrency and digital assets because of the income that could provide them. It gave them a reason to use it. It created value to the Philippine people. And I think that is something that we can build on in many, many other use cases. And to me, remittances is the second use case in the Philippines. It's still in its early stages, but I think this will potentially change the way that people send money around the world, but specifically the way it'll impact the Philippine economy. Now, I mentioned FDI is low right now, and I think that we can significantly increase GDP to the country through remittances by creating increased volumes, more users, and an easier channel to do it. Now, this topic is very close to home for me because my mom was an OFW. She was a nurse who went to the States, and I remember growing up, we would send money back to the Philippines. And this would be a very difficult process and very expensive process, and we're talking about 20 years ago. And she would wait typically 2 to 3 days for our family to receive it here. She would probably pay anywhere between 5 and 8% of fees. And my family's from Palawan, and there's, at the time, weren't many places to receive money in Palawan. So they would actually have to, go very, very far, sometimes to Manila to get the money. And because of that, we resorted to many risky things. We would send money with family in cash across the world. Sometimes it would actually never get there. It's very hard for families to do this, and it's very, very difficult. With blockchain technology, with Binance right now, you can actually send money from anywhere in the world for free to anyone else in the world. But people don't know about this yet. It's education. It's understanding how to use the technology to benefit you. And I think if we can get 9% of the GDP from OFWs right now, from remittances, we can significantly increase that through blockchain technology. Now, can we do it, and can people understand how to do this? Philippines is number 2 in the entire world with crypto, with a Chainalysis report on crypto wallet adoption. This means that in terms of percentage of share of wallet, there's only one country in the entire world that uses more of the share of wallet in cryptocurrency, and that's Vietnam, which is historically a very, very high volume country because there's no regulation. But I think that because of this, and because of the help of the government with regulation, we can potentially be the number one country in the world in terms of crypto adoption and share, in terms of share of wallet in the next coming years. The last thing I want to talk about is job creation. So we spoke at the DICT event in Bataan, and I did hear about the DICT's objective to create more jobs in the Web3 space. Now, Web3 is very interesting because the way that you can actually create jobs. So with Web 2, typically you have a Series A, Series B, a Series C. Series A, you might raise $1 million. Series B, maybe $2 million, maybe $4 million, whatever it is. Series C, maybe 10. But this will take 2, 3, sometimes 4 years or much longer to raise money. With Web 3, you can literally do an ICO and within 1 week raise $40 million pretty easily, in a good market. And even in a bad market, people are doing this now. So the access to global liquidity is massive, and the access to global capital is massive. And we can bring this actually to the Philippines. This is a much easier way to raise money and to fund projects. Now I think that with Binance, we have Launchpad, and we have Binance Academy, and we have Binance Charities. I think there are 3 initiatives that we will help with job creation. So with Launchpad, we are actually funding projects all around the world, but also in the Philippines, where we want to help give them resources, access to capital, access to technology that they couldn't do on their own. And we do this from very little, from proof of concept, from white papers all the way to operating companies. Now, Binance Academy is something that we want to focus on tremendously in the country because education is huge. We talked about OFWs not knowing how to do this, but also college students. This is the future of the Web3 industry. Now, we are partnering with a number of different universities, including University of the Philippines, Enderun, who we spoke with last week thanks to a Lead Toes initiative at Index, and LPU, FEU, National University, AIM. These are institutions that we're speaking to regularly with to actually do a Philippine roadshow to offer free blockchain courses to university college students. We're also doing a scholarship with Educacion to give to college students to help fund their potential careers in the Web3 space. And we're also talking to a number of different institutions to do grants on research, particularly with the Department of Migrant Workers to help educate them on how we can educate more OFWs around the world. But there's no way that we can achieve these 3 things without protecting our users and regulation. So I'm going to take the next couple of minutes to talk about why user protection is so important and why regulation is so imperative to grow the industry and to grow adoption. Now this is just a snapshot of where we're regulated globally. Binance is the most regulated crypto exchange in the entire world right now. We have regulation in G7 countries, which is the hardest ones to get. We're regulated in places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, Italy, Spain, France. But I think the important thing here is, if you look at some of these countries, these are where OFWs are based. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain. These are highly concentrated OFW markets where we already have licenses and there's already adoption. Again, to my point of why I think remittances will be a next big use case. But we want to work with regulators. The only way we can get mass adoption is to work with the government and to be compliant. And that is our sole objective at this point in time, is to work with other jurisdictions and help to make sure that, what Commissioner Calvin said earlier, to prevent another collapse to happen. This is the only way to prevent the next FTX from happening, is to regulate the biggest exchanges in the entire world. So how do we do that? We have to educate, we have to promote, and we have to work together. We have to collaborate. This is actually part of the last panel discussion, collaboration and working together as an industry. I believe that we can't change the world and we can't change an industry without working together. Not one person anywhere in the world can do this. So what we want to do is to educate law enforcement. Cybersecurity is imperative as well to protect users. If we can't protect our users, no one will use it. And I think that criminals are getting smarter every day. And the only way to prevent people from getting hacked or to get their funds scammed is to actually help our law enforcement be 10 steps ahead of criminals. So what we've done recently in September was we worked with the CICC under the DICT to do a law enforcement training for over 120 government agents coming from the Philippine National Police, the NBI, the DOJ, and a number of other institutions, actually 12 different agencies, where we brought in our head of compliance, who was from Europol, who spent 12 years at Europol, to actually help the Philippine government solve real crimes that are happening now in the Philippines. We did a forensic report to actually solve some crimes and trace the flow of money and funds from cryptocurrency. Again, we are doing university partnerships, and we want to help educate the next level or the next generation of crypto adopters. My daughter is Filipino. She was born here. My wife is Filipino. I'm Filipino. My daughter will buy a virtual asset before she buys a car. That's the reality. But she will be scammed if you don't protect her. We need to protect her, and we need to work with regulators and law enforcement to do this, which is why I think we need to support the government in all their initiatives in order to make this happen. And lastly, we want to give back to the community. So as I mentioned before, we have standing MOUs with the Department of Migrant Workers. We are in touch with CHED. We are in touch with the DA. We want to give back to people that need it the most. I think OFWs have a number of different ways we can help, but also education, farmers, and the people who need it the most, where we can actually use technology to save costs and make it safer for them. So in order to protect users, I want to just very quickly touch upon SAFU. SAFU is Safe Asset Fund for Users. This is the biggest insurance fund for crypto exchanges in the entire world. It's over $1 billion right now to protect anyone who is hacked and if their assets are on the exchange itself. This is topped up regularly, and it is there to protect our users. We also recently launched the IRI, which is a recovery fund to help those companies that were affected by the recent FTX collapse. That fund is also roughly $1 billion as well. So it is our initiative, it is our goal to help the industry. We really do believe that we want to grow the pie. It's not just about Binance getting bigger, it's about growing the industry. We can't grow unless the industry grows. So before I end my presentation, I'll just share one quick story. I mentioned to you that I met that instrumental person that made me join Binance a couple months ago. And his name was Cici, the founder of Binance. He came to the Philippines. He's actually been here, a number of times since I joined. And what he told me changed my mind, but his actions actually speak louder than words. And one thing that I think he does that's very special, that a lot of companies don't do, is he really understands the value of the asset and the value of the company. So, I don't know if everyone knows this, but every quarter or so, we burn our own coins. The profits we earn from Binance, we burn it. So roughly last quarter, we burned $500 million in BNB. Burned, just gone. And the reason he does that is because it's not about the value of the company. It's about the value we bring back to the users. Every person that bought a BNB, 3-4 years ago, is seeing that value as we burn more tokens. And that's coming from our company assets, our profit. Because he sees that it's about growing the industry. It's about growing the pie. So we need to work together as Philippine Blockchain Week, as industry leaders, to help the regulators understand how we can help protect our users, how we can further this industry and protect anyone from ever this happening again, what happened in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for your time this morning. Thank you guys for being here. I'm excited to meet all of you today. And let's go. Thank you, everyone.